The moment she walked down the aisle, her veil fluttering like a whisper of innocence, I smiled. Not because I was proud, though I should have been. Not because she looked beautiful, though she did. I smiled because I was about to disappear. The MC's voice echoed through the hall, presenting Mrs. Ella Watson. Watson, her mother's name, not mine, not her father's. That was when I realized I hadn't just raised someone else's child. I had been edited out of my own story, and she had done it perfectly. They say time moves differently at weddings. For me, it moved like honey, slow, heavy, and clinging to everything it touched. I stood near the back of the room, careful not to be in the way, watching the daughter I had raised for 15 years walk down the aisle like a stranger in a dream I wasn't supposed to be part of. Ella's dress was exactly as she dreamed it would be. We had flipped through bridal magazines on rainy Sundays, circled silhouettes and lace patterns with colored pens. She used to say, "You have better taste than Mom." She used to call me Mom. The hall shimmered with chandeliers and carefully curated joy. People clapped as she approached the altar, her hand wrapped tightly around her father's arm, my husband. He looked straight ahead. I looked at them both and wondered if I'd ever been part of their picture or just someone helping hold the frame. When the MC cleared his throat and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, presenting Mrs. Ella Watson," the room swelled with applause. My ears rang. Watson, not Green, our name. She had taken her mother's name. She had erased me with a single decision. I didn't react. I smiled. The same way I had smiled when I first took her to school, when I stayed up sewing her Halloween costume, when I sat in the ER as she cried over a broken arm and asked me not to leave. I had smiled through everything else. Why not this? I caught her eyes for a brief moment. There was nothing there, not guilt, not pride, just distance. Her father didn't look at me. He shifted slightly, his face pale under the soft golden light. His silence screamed across the room louder than any betrayal. After the vows were exchanged, I walked slowly toward the reception area. No one stopped me. No one really noticed. I took my seat at the edge of a table that bore no place card with my name. I had been invited, technically, but not included. It was a subtle exile wrapped in white roses and polite applause. Speeches began. The best friend spoke. Her father spoke. Even the wedding planner said something charming and utterly forgettable. No mention of the woman who had packed Ella's lunch every day, who had fought with school counselors on her behalf, who had sat through every parent-teacher conference like it was her own child's life being graded. Then the screen dropped and the wedding video began playing, a montage of memories. Baby Ella, toddler Ella, schoolgirl Ella, all interspersed with photos of her and her birth mother, smiling, hugging, laughing. There was no grace in that reel, not one frame, not even by accident. I felt something inside me crack, not violently, but like old wood under too much pressure. I kept my expression calm, my hands folded on my lap. The woman sitting beside me wiped away tears, turned and whispered, "How beautiful to see her reconnect with her real mom." I excused myself quietly, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor as I walked out. Outside, the night was still and cold. The air felt like truth, sharp and unkind. I reached into my purse and pulled out the gift I had brought, a velvet box tied with a silver ribbon. Inside was a simple locket engraved with the word "always" and a folded letter, one she had written to me 5 years ago when she thought I might die after a car accident. "Dear Mom," it began, "you're not my mother by blood, but you're the only one who's ever loved me like one. If anything happens to you, I just want you to know. I'd be lost without you." I had kept that letter hidden for years, tucked behind bills and prescriptions, revisiting it on hard days as a reminder that I mattered. I had planned to return it to her tonight, to show her where we'd started, how far we had come. But it didn't belong anymore. Not to her. Not to me. I placed the box gently on the gift table, somewhere among the fancy wrapping paper and designer envelopes. Then I walked away. not out of rage, not out of sorrow. I walked away because some things, when broken, don't make a sound. They just vanish. Like a name, like a role, like a mother who never was. The silence didn't leave after the wedding. It followed me home, wrapped around my shoulders like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. For days, I moved through the house like a ghost, dusting off picture frames that now felt more like lies than memories. Each smiling photo of Ella stared back at me, asking a question I didn't know how to answer. I started noticing things I had missed before, like how, over the past 2 years, Ella had stopped calling me Mom altogether, replacing it with awkward silence or forced gratitude. She used to throw her arms around me when she came home, ask about my day, leave me sticky notes with "Love you" scrawled in pink ink. That stopped. Slowly. Quietly. I thought it was adulthood. I thought it was independence. I scrolled through her Instagram, something I hadn't done in months. Her captions hit differently now. One photo from her graduation, her and her father, beaming. The caption, "Thanks for always being there, Dad. And to the woman who gave me life, your strength lives in me every day." I had taken that picture. I had been the one holding the camera, telling them to stand a little closer. I wasn't even tagged. Rejection had been there, breadcrumb by breadcrumb. I just hadn't noticed I was being led to the edge of a cliff. The final push came through a phone call. It was Lydia, a mutual friend from a nonprofit board I had stepped down from last year. She was catching up, asking how the wedding went, when she casually mentioned, "Funny thing, I heard from one of the treasurers that Catherine's back in town. She bought a new condo. Must be nice. Apparently, someone wired her a sizable fund last quarter. I assumed it was child support or inheritance." Catherine. Ella's mother. A woman who had disappeared from Ella's life for over a decade, only to return and reclaim the spotlight at the altar. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. Do you know where the wire came from? Some family trust account. Green Family Holdings, I think. After we hung up, I went straight to the study, my husband's study, a place I rarely entered anymore. I opened his desk drawer, second one on the left. He always kept duplicate files there before moving them to the safe. It was a habit I had learned over time, a convenience born from trust, or maybe from complacency. Inside, I found a folder labeled Beneficiary Updates. The latest page had Catherine's name typed in clean, sharp letters, right under the title, Sole Guardian and Beneficiary, Ella Green Trust, effective 8 months prior. My name was nowhere on the new version, but it was on the one beneath it. The older document, worn at the edges, it listed me as guardian by bond, a legal term, one that meant something real once. I kept flipping. Then I found it. A notarized form, signed by Ella. I, Ella Green, hereby dissolve legal and emotional guardianship ties with Grace Green, effective immediately. The ink looked fresh, but the date told me it had been written 6 weeks before we went wedding dress shopping. 8 months ago, she had erased me, and I hadn't even felt the blade. I sat on the floor, holding the paper with shaking hands. My breath came shallow. The betrayal wasn't in the signature. It was in the calm, clinical language. There was no explanation, no emotion, just protocol. I pulled out my laptop and began researching Catherine. I needed to understand who she had become to warrant this reversal. That's when I found it, an online campaign titled Bloodlines and Beginnings, a series of curated talks, blogs, and fundraisers hosted by Ella Watson, celebrating reconnections between children and estranged birth mothers. It was professionally done, slick, inspirational. The latest post was a video titled, She Gave Me Life Twice, where Ella tearfully shared how her biological mother had found her way back and now co-ran a scholarship fund supporting young women seeking reconnection with their heritage. I froze when I saw the name of the foundation behind it, Green Hearts Initiative, my initiative, the one I had founded 10 years ago, in Ella's name. the one I had quietly stepped back from to let her grow. I opened the financial reports. Ella had filed to rename the organization, stripping my name and connection entirely. The public believed it had always been hers, and that she was the daughter of a fallen angel who had clawed her way back from addiction, reclaiming her role as a mother with grace and courage. It was a great story. It just wasn't true. And now, I was its footnote, or worse, its villain. They had written me out of the script, so I wrote myself back in, but not loudly, not with rage or vengeance. There would be no social media rants, no weepy confrontations. That wasn't my story to tell, not yet. Instead, I moved in the dark with the precision of someone who had spent her career untangling truth from illusion. My years as a legal consultant hadn't dulled. They'd simply been dormant. The first move was quiet. A single email from an account with no name, no history. I sent it to 3 journalists, 2 watchdog bloggers, and 1 influential academic who specialized in nonprofit fraud. Attached, a scanned court document from 2004 buried in municipal archives showing Catherine Watson, yes, that Catherine, was convicted of embezzling $38,000 from a student scholarship fund in Oregon. The timing was poetic. Her Bloodlines and Beginnings campaign had just received a 6-figure donation, the kind of money that makes reporters pay attention. By the end of the week, murmurs began online. Nothing concrete, yet, just speculation. Anonymous comments under news articles, quiet threads on niche forums, questioning whether the story Ella was selling was the whole truth. I watched them quietly build like a tide coming in. Then I pulled the second string. I contacted the oversight committee of the original Green Hearts Initiative. Though I no longer sat on the board, I still had connections. I suggested, politely, that a full financial audit might be a wise precaution, considering the foundation's sudden rebranding, leadership change, and the growing attention it was receiving. They agreed. Within days, operations were paused, pending routine compliance checks, the public line. But behind closed doors, assets were frozen, transactions reviewed, donations held. Ella posted a video about unfortunate administrative delays with a soft smile and tearful eyes. Comments flooded in with support. Hashtags bloomed. But underneath the surface, the ground was beginning to crack. I wasn't done. I had one last card, one I hadn't intended to play. It was a photo, not staged, not curated, just a raw, honest moment from a different lifetime. Ella, age 13, hugging me with a ferocity that still warmed and wounded me at once. Her face was buried in my neck. The Sharpie-scrawled words on her t-shirt said, "You saved me." I had taken that photo down from the fridge years ago, replaced it with holiday cards and neutral memories. But I still had a copy, and I knew how to leak it without leaving fingerprints. I uploaded it to a public Google Drive folder, shared with a parenting blog I knew Ella followed. The image surfaced on their forum within hours. No caption, no context, just truth, waiting to be interpreted. By morning, it was everywhere. The internet cracked wide open. Some commenters defended her fiercely. "Kids are allowed to change. Don't weaponize love." Others weren't so kind. "You don't get to erase a woman who raised you just because blood came back into the picture." The war lines were drawn. Team Grace versus Team Watson. I didn't watch the comment sections. I had never played this game for likes. My war wasn't about reputation. It was about truth, half buried and conveniently forgotten. 3 days later, Ella scheduled a live press conference. The announcement came with her signature aesthetic: soft lighting, tear-glossed eyes, humble defiance. She wore a cream blouse, delicate pearls, a daughter trying to look like a peacemaker, a victim of misunderstanding. I didn't plan to attend. I had intended to let the media do what it does best, consume and regurgitate. But something pulled me there. I arrived 15 minutes early. I didn't sit down. I stood in the back, near the emergency exit. I wasn't there to speak, just to listen, to see if she'd tell the truth. Any of it. She didn't. She talked about forgiveness, about second chances, about a past that no longer defines who my mother is. She weaved a tale of redemption, healing, and selective memory. She never mentioned me by name, just the woman who helped raise me. Helped. I looked down at the file in my hands. Court documents, receipts, letters, the scholarship report from 2004, her childhood journal entry where she wrote, "I hope Grace never leaves me. She's my real mom." All of it. I had brought it in case I felt brave, but as she spoke, I realized bravery wasn't saying anything. Bravery was letting her know I was there, and that I remembered. So I walked out before the applause started. She saw me. Just as she looked toward the back, her smile faltered. Just for a second. It was enough. The room was bright with staged empathy. Cameras framed Ella like a saint mid-rescue. She sat poised at a white draped table, flanked by her PR team, a legal advisor, and her mother, smiling, subtle, softly rebranded, a carefully designed image of redemption. The press conference was supposed to mark a turning point. She was here to reclaim the narrative, explain away the audit delays, distance herself from her mother's old legal record, and spin it all into another story of healing and legacy. Until the final question. It came from a young man in the second row, clean-shaven, notebook in hand, press badge clearly visible. Ella had called on him herself, likely thinking him harmless. He stood up slowly and asked, "What about the signed guardianship file dated 2012? The one where you officially named Grace Green as your legal guardian and mother figure?" The room froze. Ella blinked, a flicker of confusion, then dread. Her lips parted slightly, as if to stall time. She tried to speak, but the projector screen behind her lit up with an image, a scan of the document. It was clean, official, dated, signed by both Ella and a family court judge. The designation was unambiguous. Guardianship by Bond Grace Green. Handwritten in the bottom margin were Ella's own words. "She's not my birth mother, but she's saved my life more than once." The silence thickened. The reporter continued, "If your foundation was built on reconnection and transparency, why erase the woman who raised you for over a decade?" Gasps rose from the crowd. Flashbulbs flickered. The live stream chat exploded. Ella's team rushed to kill the screen, but it was too late. The internet had it. The audience had it. The court of public opinion had it. And it was hungry. By nightfall, her foundation's page had gone dark. Multiple donors issued statements of concern. The scholarship account was frozen again, this time indefinitely. Catherine, her mother, found herself named in a reopened investigation regarding the mishandling of historical nonprofit funds. Her past wasn't just back, it was center stage. Ella tried to contain the fallout, posted a video, then deleted it, posted again. Comments were disabled, but the momentum was against her now. The story wasn't about reconnection anymore, it was about betrayal, fabrication, and the woman she had systematically written out of her life. 3 days later, she showed up at my door. I didn't open it right away. I watched her through the peephole. She looked small in a way I hadn't seen in years. No makeup, no entourage, just a girl holding herself together by the threads of guilt. When I let her in, she didn't speak at first, just stood in the entryway, clutching the hem of her sleeve. Then her voice broke. "I didn't mean to erase you." I studied her, and for the first time, I wasn't looking at the woman the world saw. I was looking at the child who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during thunderstorms, and still, I felt nothing soft rise inside me. "You didn't just erase me," I said. "You edited me out frame by frame, legally, emotionally, publicly. And now, what, you want to paste me back in because your story's unraveling?" Tears welled in her eyes. "It got away from me. You were trying to rewrite the past," I said, "but you forgot it wasn't fiction. I was there." She took a step forward. "You don't understand, Mom." I raised a hand. Don't use that word. She stopped. The hallway seemed to shrink around us, closing in with memory. I lost a child, I said quietly. You never knew. It was early, barely even counted, they said, but it counted to me. Her face twisted with confusion. That year, I continued, I couldn't breathe, couldn't sleep. And then you came in with that scraped knee and sobbed because some girl at school said you didn't have a real mom. You looked at me like I was the only anchor in your storm. You were the reason I got out of bed again. You were my reason. She sank to her knees. I never wanted to hurt you, she cried. I thought, maybe it would be easier if I was invisible, I whispered. Well, congratulations. You did it. Perfectly. She sobbed into her hands. The sound echoed through the corridor, raw and animal. I didn't touch her, didn't comfort her, because some losses don't want closure. They want truth. And I had finally spoken mine. The stage was wide, sterile, and soft-lit, designed for comfort, not confrontation. I stood behind the lectern, my hands steady on either side of the mic. The conference hall was filled with policymakers, child psychologists, legal advocates. The theme of the forum, step-parents and the unseen bonds of family law. I had been invited as a speaker, not for the scandal, but for the aftermath, for the silence I carried and the story I never tried to sell. I cleared my throat and looked up at the rows of expectant faces. I'm not here, I began, to talk about betrayal or forgiveness or loss. Those words get too much credit. I'm here to talk about something quieter, something sharper. A pause. Being invisible isn't painful, I said. Being rewritten is. The room held its breath. I spoke of what it felt like to raise a child you never birthed, only to have your name peeled from her memories like an outdated label. I told them how the law protects blood, how biology is worshipped, and how mothers by choice are still seen as placeholders, provisional love, until the real thing returns. But love, I added, isn't provisional. An absence doesn't earn amnesty just by showing up again. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. My story wasn't just mine. It was the story of thousands. It struck. By the time I left the stage, people were crying, not loudly, not performatively, just silently, like I had for years. The speech went viral in ways I hadn't anticipated, not scandal viral, not drama viral. It became something else, an anthem for the unrecognized. A production company reached out the next day. They wanted to option my story, turn it into a film, maybe even a limited series. I declined. They were surprised. You could change the conversation, the producer said. You could own your version. I already have, I replied. I just don't need to sell it. I didn't want justice through headlines. I didn't want fame as consolation. Some stories are better left whole and quiet, like a painting no longer for display, but still hanging in the artist's private room. And so I chose a different kind of victory. Retreat. Not from fear, but from noise. I no longer needed to fight to be seen. I had become real to myself again, and that was enough. Meanwhile, Ella disappeared, from news feeds, from interviews, from everything. The Scholarship Foundation shut down. Donors pulled out. Her mother vanished. Again. Some said she fled the country. Others claimed she had changed her name. Started over. I never checked. Ella moved into a smaller apartment on the far edge of the city. I heard this from Lydia, who still kept tabs in quiet ways. No trust fund, no followers, no curated life. Just a quiet echo of something that had once been gold-plated and paper-thin. I didn't expect to hear from her again. I didn't want to. But one morning, I received a notification from my P.O. box. A package, no sender listed. Inside, I found something strange. A copy of the speech I had given, printed and highlighted. Certain words underlined, circled, rewritten, bond, erased, and tucked between the pages, a small flat box. I opened it slowly. Inside was the original letter Ella had written me when she was 13. the one I had returned unread. But this version had something new. At the bottom, in her handwriting, a single line. "You were always loved. You just didn't know how to hold it." The ink was dark, deliberate, the kind of sentence someone rewrites several times before getting it right. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I walked to the garden behind the house, the one she used to help me tend when she was little. I buried the package beneath the rosemary bush, not as an offering, not as a punishment, but as a burial, not of her, of the chapter. It wasn't hate I felt. It wasn't even forgiveness. It was the clean stillness of closure. Some stories aren't meant to be continued. They're meant to be left whole and undisturbed, finished not with a bang, but with the quiet weight of having meant something once, and then no longer. It started small, an idea scratched on the back of a grocery receipt, born not out of ambition but need, a space, a place, for women like me, not victims, not martyrs, just invisible mothers. I called it the Invisible Mothers Project. Funded quietly with what remained of my investments and years of unspent dreams, it was built not on brick or policy, but empathy. We opened in a converted schoolhouse on the outskirts of the city. No signs, no marketing, just a door, a kettle, and chairs where silence was allowed to breathe. The first women arrived slowly. A retired nurse who had raised her husband's children and wasn't invited to their weddings. A former teacher whose stepdaughter blocked her on every platform after graduation. A woman who had signed every permission slip, only to be called just the stepmom when the real one came back. We didn't talk about forgiveness. We didn't dissect anger. We shared stories. We gave each other permission to say, "It hurt," without needing to follow it with, "But I understand." In one room, we built a wall of frames, but instead of photographs, each woman was given a blank canvas. "Your family as you knew it," I told them. Not as it ended, not as others rewrote it, but as they lived it. Some drew children's handprints, some sketched empty chairs, some wrote names with no faces. Every frame told a story that had once been erased. Now, it was seen. One day during a spring event, a little girl wandered into the gallery holding a worn notebook. She was quiet, curious. Her caretaker whispered that the child had lost her biological mother at birth and had since lived in a series of temporary homes. She looked up at me with eyes too old for her years and asked, "Can I draw you as my mom?" The air stilled. I knelt beside her and smiled gently. "Only if I get to draw you back." She nodded, opened her notebook, and began. That night, I sat by the window and thought of all the titles I had carried: wife, stepmom, legal guardian, ghost. And now, maybe something quieter, softer, not claimed, not demanded, just given. Years passed. The project grew beyond its walls. Other cities adopted the model, support circles formed. A journalist who visited once returned years later as a donor. She wrote a piece for a national magazine calling us the quiet revolution of unsung love. One winter morning, I received a parcel, hardbound, wrapped in linen, a novel, The Unnamed Mom. Inside the front cover was a dedication to the women who loved without proof. I read it in one sitting. The story followed a woman who raised a daughter that wasn't hers, lost her place in that girl's life, and rebuilt herself from the memory of who she once was. It wasn't my exact story, but it was close enough to ache. No author photo, no detailed acknowledgments, just a final page with one line. What if the mother who didn't birth you was the one who taught you how to live? I closed the book slowly. Some said it was written by Ella. Others believed it was based on multiple women. Rumors stirred. But I never asked. I never needed to know. Because sometimes the most powerful truth is the one left unnamed. In a village far from the city's noise, I live quietly now. A garden, a dog, a mailbox that rarely gets bills. Some afternoons, women still visit, holding old letters or just the weight of unsaid things. I pour tea. We sit in silence. It's enough. I no longer chase meaning. I no longer ask why I was left behind. I was never behind. I was simply ahead of a story the world hadn't learned to honor yet. And now I live not to be remembered, but to be real.